Candace Stewart. Welcome to my podcast, Trade Secrets. And today I have a legend, a hero amongst audio people, Adam Moseley, producer, engineer, songwriter. We're going to dig in. I'm probably going to find out that you play the sousaphone. I mean, I don't know. So I start them all the same, which is I ask, where were you born?
I was born in Brighton.
Oh, that's right. You talked about that. I love Brighton.
Yeah, south of England. I find it one of the hardest phrases for me because I don't pronounce my R's properly is born and bred in Brighton. And I really have to focus on that and I still mess it up.
Yeah, just a yeah. Well, I'm one of the few people who loves Eastbourne, probably. I'm obsessed with that part of Sussex, with that southeast part. So I love Brighton and Hove, and we were laughing about the chocolates from Hove, which are 5 feet away from Brighton.
Yeah, the Hove, actually, the candy.
This is about you, but I do have a really funny story about Brighton.
Please go ahead.
And because it's my podcast, I can say whatever the fuck I want. So
exactly.
I was in Eastbourne with my husband, Brian, who you know, and he has a weed addiction and or a weed problem. I guess it's not a problem for him. But anyway, this is long before, this is years ago. This is like in 2003. And we're in the lanes in Brighton, like in a pub.
Lovely.
And they're playing the Chili Peppers on the stereo. And this is time of CDs, right?
Yeah.
So I have my business card. And I'm like, fuck, where am I going to get weed for my husband? I'm like, fuck, I got some weed. Not even thinking that weed's not really a thing, that it's like hash. And so I'm like, okay. I walk up to the bartender and I go, hey, you hear that music? And he goes, and I never do this, by the way. This is a super like dick move. But I go, hey, you hear that CD playing right now? And then he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, do you have a CD? And he goes, I do. And I said, why don't you go get it? Let me show you something on the back. And he goes, okay, what? So he shows me the CD, and then I pull out my business card, and I had a special thanks on this particular record.
Fantastic.
To be honest, I don't even remember what record it was. But it was the Chili Peppers. And I go, listen, I really need to get some weed for my husband. And he goes, okay, well, come back later. My roommates and I will hook you up. So they lived in Hove.
All the way to Hove.
All the way to Hove, which was literally like 100 feet or 100 yards. And we go, and there's like 7 guys living in this one-bedroom apartment, right? So we get, and we're staying in a timeshare, because I have a timeshare, and I had traded my timeshare in Maui for this timeshare in Eastbourne. And we're on the second floor of this thing, and we've got 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, right on the ocean, honor bar. Don't ever have an honor bar around me. This is it. Me and honor and bar shouldn't be in the same fucking sentence. But so we go and we get like an ounce of Afghani hash from this guy.
Oh, my God.
And we're going to Paris like 2 days later on the Eurostar on the bullet train.
Yeah.
And so we have to smoke this ounce of hash in like a day and a half.
Because the option not to smoke at all didn't exist. So.
Well, we also couldn't. I had to explain to Brian that the French weren't cool and that taking it on the train was a bad idea.
Bad idea.
That French aren't,
Yeah.
it wasn't cool at the time. It's probably not cool now. And we're like rolling on the carpet, like hallucinating because we smoke all of this hash. And we go to some pub and he starts sitting in, and our last name is Stewart. And I convince the people in the pub that he's Rod Stewart's cousin. And it's, you can't even make this shit up. But anyway, enough about me. Adam, I love you. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm thrilled to be here.
So you were born in Brighton.
I was.
Did you toddle over to Hove?
Occasionally, yeah.
You just got out?
If my papers were okay, I could go into Hove, cross the border.
No. Your parents would be like, he's gone to Hove again.
Will he ever come back? Yeah, that was the beginning of my travels. That's what.
Yeah, if you don't know where that is, look up on a map and you'll see why we're laughing so hard. So, siblings, brothers and sisters.
Yeah, twin brother.
Really?
Yeah,
and how did I not know
this?
Oldest
Is
he here today and you're not really here?
Yeah, that's it. No. Today's my alter ego.
Okay.
But my brother's still in England. He was an attorney. He's still an attorney, but he's also a jazz singer and sax player.
Oh.
Yeah, we started off doing music together, but born in Brighton. But Brighton we always felt was like the equivalent of the West Coast. And
except for the East Coast, but okay.
Yeah, but it was the most liberal town in England.
Oh, yeah.
Most open-minded.
Huge homosexual population.
Yeah, and in England, especially growing up in the 60s, which I did. I was born in 57, and And
yeah, I'm 59.
Yeah, and yeah, growing up in Brighton, especially in the 60s with the Mods and the Rockers.
Yeah.
Brighton was where they would always meet on the seafront.
Yep.
The Who film Quadrophenia was all about Brighton.
Did the Kinks do a bunch of stuff there too as well?
But Brighton was probably the only town in the 60s where a young couple could go and get a room without having a marriage certificate.
Right, because I carry mine around in my purse.
Oh yeah, we all do. Yeah, so Brighton was known as the place where you'd go for a dirty weekend.
Oh, nice. That makes total sense. Yeah,
and of course it was near London, so people could dash down. But also, the Mods and the Rockers would assemble in Brighton.
I took the bus from Eastbourne.
Wow,
it was like 5 minutes or something.
Yeah, along the seafront.
Yeah.
So, yeah, growing up in the 60s, I remember. Never allowed out on like bank holiday weekends because all the Mods would come down, the Rockers would come down, they'd meet on the seafront, and there'd always be this face-off kind of thing.
I was going to say, so this is like, what's that movie, West Side Story, where there two gangs vying for power?
Right, but without the songs and the dance routines.
Yeah, without the dance routines, yeah.
And it was always just like the Mods all wore Ben Sherman stuff, two-tone suits that were shiny, button-down, short collars. So the mod bands, the Kinks, Traffic, Small Faces. Later, the Oasis were very much wanting to follow that.
Yes.
But the mod thing was very much, out of Brighton.
Interesting.
And nothing ever happened. They'd face off near the Palace Pier on the seafront, and one year, the Rockers would have bike chains, and the Mods would have.
Now, see, this is the Rockers had bike chains.
Yeah, and they were they were like greasy head and all that, and the Mods were all like
primped.
Yeah, they looked
put
like
together.
They looked like Steve Marriott and Stevie Winwood,
nice.
Really tight suits and stuff, and they'd have like flick knives, and basically they'd meet on the seafront, separated. Going, go on then, and the others are going, I'll do you, and it's like, come on then, and nothing ever happened.
Good.
Except I think one year, one of the Mods went, come on then, and tripped, and accidentally nicked one of the Rockers, and that was the big fight. That was the front page of all the newspapers, the big Mods and Rockers clash. And then it must have been 50 years later, I was back in England on a visit, I'm driving down to Brighton from London with my 10-year-old son, and we're in the car, and there's all the Mods on their Vespers because they wore Parkers and Vespers and all that, and they're all on their Vespers,
scooters,
trying to get down to Brighton. And I said to my son, these guys are the reason when I was your age, I was never allowed out. And my son looked at these guys who were all in their 60s,
on suits,
putting down. And he said, Dad, you must have been such a pussy. And I said they weren't 60 and 70 years old.
Yeah, they were 18.
They were 18 and they looked dangerous, and I was 10.
That's so funny. So what did your mom and dad do?
My dad was a semi-pro jazz musician. He worked in London in the daytime, would commute to London every day from Brighton, come back. My brother and I would load up the car with his instruments, amps, the music stands for his band.
Are you a junior? Was he Adam?
No. His name was Bernard.
Bernard.
Yeah.
Bernard Moseley.
But he couldn't use the name Moseley because Moseley had, in the 30s in England, was the leader of the fascist movement in England, in cahoots with the Germans. And he was such a good fascist that they made him a Sir. So he was Sir Oswald Moseley. Yeah. And my mum was born in the East End of London, both immigrants.
She was best friends with Michael Caine.
Right, yeah, I wish. But my mum was born down Brick Lane.
Okay. Yeah.
And during the 30s, Sir Oswald Moseley would lead the fascists to smash up all the shops because it was the Jewish immigrant era. So my dad couldn't use the music name Moseley because he wasn't going to get any Jewish gigs or weddings, bar mitzvahs. So pretty soon he turned around. He played upright bass and electric bass.
Are you a bass player or guitar player?
I fumble around on loads of instruments. I'm master of none. The only thing I ever did properly on sessions was backing vocals.
I can see that.
And I did a lot of singing. I did loads of albums with Mike Stone, who did the first 5 Queen albums.
I love him.
And Mike would always...
He's gone now, though.
Yeah. And if there were ever like vocals needed last minute, on a record, Mike would say, "Oh, can you hop in and do some backing vocals?"
Oh, dude, I met him at the record plant probably when I was about 17.
Yeah. Oh, loveliest guy.
Nice guy. He ended up going out with Nancy Boykus, who worked at the record plant.
Oh, really?
Story for another time.
So my dad was a jazz musician. Originally, he played jazz guitar, and then went on to upright bass, electric bass. And my dad at 17 had gone into the Second World War. He volunteered, went into the Air Force, and became a radio mechanic on bomber planes.
My dad did a similar thing in the Army. He was a radio mechanic.
So my dad was on Mosquito bombers, the 600 squadrons. After the war, the whole house was set up with stereo speakers everywhere, and I never realized how
cool that was.
And what a big influence it played on me, because in the kitchen, my brother and I would sit at the kitchen table, do our homework. My mum stayed at home to bring us all up, and my older sister. So we'd have music on all day coming from the hi-fi in the lounge.
Running throughout the whole house.
Yeah, playing in stereo. And so from the earliest memory, I was aware of like spatial and sound, and what I didn't realize, I was understanding arrangement of music and arrangement of like.
Well, because you were listening to jazz probably most of the time, or swing maybe.
That's it. My parents loved swing, big band, jazz, bebop. My mum would be singing along all day to Ella, Sarah Vaughan, Sinatra, Perry Como, the Beatles, Elvis. Whatever was coming out. So that was amazing.
Did they go to dances, your parents?
No, not really. My dad was always working.
Yeah.
He'd work during the day, come home. We'd load up the car with his gear. My mum would make him a quick coffee and a sandwich, and then he'd jump off and do a gig till 2 a.m., come back. He'd be up at 5 to go back to get to the train station to commute back to London.
He's the hardest working generation on earth.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I just grew up in a house of music. We'll get into some of my career, but people often say, "Oh, you're so lucky to have done what you've done." Luck wasn't there. Every penny I earned 4 times over in records that I did for free to try and get where I was.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I think is luck is that I was born into a musical family, and we had music all the time. My sister is 5 years older. So when the Beatles broke in 1962, I was 5, she was 10. Perfect.
Right.
Every day.
I have 3 older siblings.
Right. Every day there was a new record that she brought home, or her friends were playing a new record.
Remember the 45? I guess still now, you could correct me because you'll probably know I always fuck this up. Was it Let It Be was on the other side? Was Get Back? What was on the other?
I can't remember.
Fuck, I can't remember.
But my sister had one of those little decks, that you could put 45s and stack them up, and of course they'd get scratched and they'd be useless.
Yeah.
But I remember as well, like my dad had a reel-to-reel, and it's amazing as I look back on maybe things that influenced me into like my musical awareness. But he had a reel-to-reel machine, 4-track.
I wonder who made that machine.
I think it was later. It was an Akai, or maybe it was an Agfa or something. I can't remember.
Interesting.
But it had a
lot of German electronics.
Yeah, which was always a bit odd in our house. 20 years.
Yeah.
Late.
I think Studer Revox was actually Swiss.
Yeah, that was okay. Yeah.
Switzerland is okay.
Yeah, it was all right. But I remember from an earliest age, from an earliest age, with Top of the Pops.
Yep.
And my dad's reel-to-reel. So I remember watching Top of the Pops, my dad's reel-to-reel machine. It had a microphone on a cable, and it was a set length. My mum, when she'd sit and watch TV, had a stool to put her feet on. So when Top of the Pops came on, I'd set up the reel-to-reel. I'd ask my dad if there was a spare tape I could use. I'd stretch the microphone as far as I could. I'd turn the TV angle and put the microphone on my mum's footstool and try and position it to get the best sound so I could record songs off Top of the Pops.
Dude, I love it. And it's 1/4 inch. It's reel-to-reel, yeah.
Yeah, 4-track 1/4 inch. And I don't know, I was 10, 12. And already I was like trying to work out the best position for the microphone.
It's all about microphone position, by the way, which I brutalized throughout these interviews.
Yeah,
So it's so telling to me because a lot of people. One of the reasons I wanted to do this was first of all to have the memories and to honor people like you, but it's very telling that even with people who are contractors or managers or people who aren't directly musicians, that they have almost all of them had some sort of early introduction, was around music. Their parents are musicians or something like that, and it's art in the schools. Let's just go there. Let's have art in the schools again. Let's have music. So I want to get to, you're little and you're doing this and you're already kind of interested in how to, capture it because you want to mess around. Were you in, did you have like a chorus class in school or band in school? Like elementary? Your school is different, elementary and primary school?
So after junior school, which is up to the age of 11, then I went to grammar school. Which is your second school? Yeah, it's the second school, and at that time there was like two different tiers. Grammar school was the higher education standard, and if you didn't pass your
you were going to be a blue collar worker,
right, you went to secondary modern school.
Secondary modern school,
and which was a very fancy name for it. Or you went to grammar school. So I went to an all boys school, 630 boys.
Oh wow!
It was.
Was it Catholic or was it parochial? Was it?
It was pretty much all Church of England Protestant.
Oh, C of E. Yeah, see, I'm Episcopalian.
There were out of 630 boys, there were 15 Catholics and 7 Jews.
Okay, yeah, I see.
So that was not a lot of fun. The first 2 years,
those 4 guys, yeah.
Yeah, we were fighting every day. And then after the first 2 years, I went to the Catholics. And I said, look, this is stupid. There's 7 of us. Once they've put us down, they come after you. If you get in one stage earlier, there'll be 22 of us and we can put up a fight. So at 13,
You're an organizer?
I put the gang together of like the Jews and it wasn't quite West Side Story. We still didn't have the material yet. But, we had the dance routines, jumping around.
But what was there
no
art
band.
or anything in that school?
No. The only music was to play hymns in morning assembly. So I wanted to study music. I wanted to take it as a class. And my music teacher said, well, you can only study music. You can only take music for the next 5 years if you play in the orchestra. And I said, well, the orchestra only plays Christian hymns. And he said, well, obviously you're not interested in music, so I'm not going to let you learn music at school. I'm not going to let you borrow school instruments or have private music lessons at school.
Unless you join the orchestra.
Yeah, and play Christian hymns, which, so he barred me from learning music.
What a dick.
Yeah.
He's long gone now, I'm sure.
I would love to dig him up.
He's probably very free. Literally.
Yeah. And just go. Yeah,
see, it didn't stop you. So that just meant you had to go outside of school.
Maybe more determined.
You and your brother.
Yeah. So we put a band together at school, but with some musicians. And again, there weren't a lot. So we were like, my brother and I were doing like R&B, Marvin Gaye covers and Boz Scaggs and stuff like. And
was Boz around then? Well, I guess you and I are similar in age.
Yeah. Well, once we got into our 15, 16. So we were doing like. Boz Scaggs, What Can I Say? Marvin Gaye, Let's Get It On, because it's really simple to play. And my brother and I both played saxophone then. I was playing alto, my brother was playing tenor, and we were doing Average White Band stuff.
Dude, I love it.
So we were playing, Pick Up the Pieces.
Oh, dude, what great stuff.
Late, Steve Ferroni comes from Brighton.
I forgot about that. I'm going to razz him about that.
Yeah. So we'd got to know Steve and got to know the Average White Band. And later, Steve was probably the biggest factor in my switch to America because in 81, I moved to New York and stayed with Steve for 6 months, which was amazing.
What a sweetheart. If you don't know who Steve Ferroni is, look it up. He's one of the greatest drummers on the earth.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Sweet guy.
So, we put a band.
I always thought he was Jamaican, though.
No, from Brighton.
He's from Brighton. That makes sense then.
So we put a band together.
That's where the British act. That makes sense now.
Yeah, exactly. So my brother and I put a band together, 15 years old. We did one gig.
What was the name of the band?
Oh, I think...
What's your brother's name?
Dexter.
Adam and Dexter.
Yes. and my brother got his name because when we were about to be born, just before that, my parents went to see the film High Society with Bing Crosby and Sinatra, and
Nice.
I think Sinatra's character is Dexter.
Is named Dexter,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they thought, well, the first boy that comes out, if it's a boy, we'll call him Adam, you know.
Like the first man.
Yeah, and the second one will get creative with the name.
Were you like, so you're like a couple minutes older?
5 minutes. Yeah, 5 or 10, I can't remember now.
Just older brother all the way.
Yeah, all the way.
You be quiet over there. You're younger than me.
Yeah, I'm the big one. So put a band together, played, and we did the one show, and my cousin still, 50 years later, I guess it is, 52 years later, still loves to tell us how crap we were. And,
But what is the cousin doing?
right. No,
That's what I'm saying.
He's doing okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And like even now I say, yeah, but I've done a few good records. Since, yeah, but you were crap that bad. You know, it's like, can we
Dude, you can't live it down?
Can you get over it? So anyway, I realised that the reason we were crap was because we were in a small town. There weren't lots of musicians to choose, so I would need to get to London. If I can get to London, there's going to be all the musicians in the world. I can put a band together and become a rock star. So the long journey of that, in my holidays, I used to work in France. I worked for a language exchange school.
Oh, fun.
Every holiday when I was like 15, 16, I was
Nice.
working in the south of France.
Ooh, how erudite, how cosmopolitan.
At school, the only thing I was good at was languages. I failed all the sciences. I failed all the maths things.
Oh, wow.
The only thing I was good at was languages. And again, I realized that languages is like sounds and nuances.
That
and
actually is
flow.
interesting. I was a linguistics major when I started college, but I quickly failed Chinese and switched to geology.
Yeah, I probably Chinese.
Chinese
would've-
was gnarly.
Yeah.
It kind of put it. And then my German teacher was a perv who, I won't talk about that, but he was pretty gnarly. And I threatened him that I would turn him in unless he gave me an A because he was such a creeper. That's another story. So you're going to France?
Yeah, in my holidays, in my school holidays.
Was like
I was-
Johnny Halliday around then? Or
Yeah.
Really?
And later worked with Alain Barrière and Johnny Hallyday and Clo-Clo and all those big American stars. And for the last few days, all I've got
Big
in my
French stars that Americans know. But yeah.
all I've had in my head is Françoise Hardy songs for the
I don't
last
know who
few
that
days.
is.
Oh, she was a beautiful, amazing
Oh, now
singer.
I'm going to check it out.
Yeah. You'd know the stuff if you hear it. But so I thought I have to get to London. So I thought if I go and study in London, I can get government assistance, get grants that will pay for me to move to London. And basically, as long as I go to my classes, you know,
Yeah.
I can stay in London, put a band together, become a rock star. So I took a year off. I took a gap year. I worked on construction sites to make money.
That's why you got a good body.
Previously, I'd traveled around Europe, and I'd end up in Sweden previously, and I wanted to go back. So I worked on construction sites, made some money, went back to Sweden for the remaining 8-9 months of that gap year.
How old were you? Like 17, 18?
17, 18.
Yeah.
And when I'd gone backpacking 2 years earlier, I was broke within a week. I was dumpster diving. I was sleeping rough on beaches, on park benches.
Yeah.
And I realized next time I go traveling, get a job with food. So I got 3 jobs with food, walked into a restaurant. I'd answered an advert. I could speak Swedish. Responded to the advert, went in. The job was for washer up.
Yeah.
I walked in. There's a huge argument going on in the restaurant. A guy storms out, and I walk up to the guy standing there, and he says, you know, what are you here for? What do you want? I said, oh, I'm here for the advert for washer up. He said, have you worked in the kitchen before? And I went, yeah. He says, can you cook?
Oh,
and I was
fuck.
like, yeah, of
So now you're
course."
cooking Swedish food?
And he says that was our assistant chef. You know, our sous chef just walked out. You're hired. You're my sous chef. You know,
I was a sous chef.
really
Like, yeah, that's just bizarre, but yeah, go ahead.
unreal. And he goes, "Here's
Not
a-"
in Sweden.
Right. And then the next thing, I've got a bucket of herring in front of me, and he
Oh,
says,
yeah.
start prepping. And I thought,
If you're listening to this and you're Swedish, don't be offended. Your cuisine is not my top cuisine.
I loved it.
You like
And-
Swedish food?
And the Swedish Affinity came out like much years later as well. That it paid off quite
My next door
nicely.
neighbor's Swedish, but he's Kurdish and his parents emigrated to Sweden before he was born, and he's a really talented live sound engineer. You might know him, actually. His name is Flash. But he goes... But his real name is Dildar Akblad. He is Kurdish. But he grew up in Sweden. And his parents are from Västerås.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not even saying that right.
Yeah, Västerås.
Västerås, yeah.
Yeah. So...
You're just a cosmopolitan cat, man. So you're sous chefing in Sweden. You're 18.
Yet, learned to cook.
Yeah. Real quick.
Yeah, real quick. I worked in the restaurant in the mornings, which was great because we'd get to the restaurant, we'd be doing lunch service. That's the shift I was on. So I'd get there early, we'd have breakfast, so all my food was taken care of.
Great.
Then we'd do serve lunch, then we'd all eat after lunch. Then I'd go to my afternoon job, which was working in a bakery. Which was a coffee shop. Yep. So I'd leave there with a box of cakes every time and go to my nighttime job, which was working in the first McDonald's in Stockholm.
Oh, my God.
And this is 1976. And we were stars with culture back then in Sweden.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. You're a foreign, you're a sensation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Did you ever think about playing music in that restaurant?
No, I was stuck in the back in the kitchen. It was like the restaurant didn't have music. But so at the end of that, I spent the rest of the year in Sweden, came back, moved to London, and I went to law school.
Look at you.
And because I thought, with my languages, I thought all I want to do is travel.
Oh, international law.
Yeah. So I thought I'll do international law and I'll just travel around the world all the time, getting paid insane money.
Fuck yeah.
And just like popping up.
Be that guy.
Yeah. And I thought that will work.
The James Bond of the lawyer community.
Exactly.
Dude, I love
special
that.
undercover agent. The only problem was at the end of the first year, I failed probate, tort, and land law, but I came third in contract.
Oh, nice. This is very invaluable for your future.
It turned out to be very useful.
Yeah.
Anyway, I couldn't bear the thought of redoing law. I'd put a band together in London, had the pick of everyone, and we were still crap.
No, I bet you weren't.
And I thought, maybe it's not to do with the town that I'm in. Maybe it's a bit closer to home. And maybe I should actually learn how this is done.
Maybe it's not them, maybe it's me.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah, exactly. So...
Right. Who would have been some of the people? So I don't know if I ever told you this, or maybe I did, that John Porter, the British producer, got me my job here.
Really?
So meeting John in the late 80s at Red Zone, he'd already done the Smiths and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So he was a pivotal character in my life who got me into 6000 Sunset. He's the one who came and ran the label for cello, got me hired to run the studio when it was cello in 1998. We're still great friends. He lives in Wiltshire.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering who would have been around in London at that time when you were around. Would it have been later than the Chaz Chandler kind of Animals period, or was it around that time?
Yeah, it was after the Animals kind of thing. So, I quit law school in 1977.
I went to the Bahamas in 1977 and worked in a bakery.
Wow.
And surfed all the time.
Amazing.
You and I have some kind of parallel
The weather was probably a bit better than it was in winter in Stockholm.
So you said, fuck it, I'm not gonna try to make it as a musician.
Well, I thought I want to be a musician, but I need to know how to do it. And from as early as I could read, my dad was always bringing home vinyl, or my sister was, and I was always reading the credits on the back, and the big name on the back of the vinyl, apart from if you were on it, was...
No, I wasn't on it back then.
Was the producer.
Glenn Johns.
Oh, man. So it was. I thought the producer...
Glenn, Andy.
Yeah.
Who was the Stones guy? Tony Scott?
Oh, I can't remember now.
Oh, fuck, what's his name? Jimmy? Somebody look up. I'm being a retard now. It's Jimmy. It's Jimmy who did all the early Stones records.
Jimmy Douglas? No.
No. This is way before Jimmy Douglas. Anyway, we'll figure it out. Someone will look it up and chime in.
Right. So, put it in the comments.
Yeah.
The big name on the back of the records was the producer.
Yeah.
I thought he must be the guy that knows, so I'll become one of them, and then I can become a rock star. So I quit law school, wrote 100 letters to studios, because there were 100 studios in London in 1977 that you could write to. I was 20 years old. I got one reply because I was too old.
At 20?
At 20. Because they wanted you straight out of school, not finishing school, 15, 16, so they could mold you in their likeness. And here I was on my, the letter that I sent with a CV saying that I'd gone to law school, I spoke languages, I'd worked abroad,
They're like, yeah, he's not going to want to clean toilets or be a T-boy.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I put that I'd worked on construction sites and that I'd worked in restaurants. I got one reply asking me to come to an interview.
Was it Trident?
Went to the interview, sat there with the studio manager. He said, why did you write to us? And I said, well, I'm wondering if you've got any jobs going as a record producer. I'd like to be one, please.
By the way, if you say that to me now in an interview, I won't hire you as one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, his reaction was to spit out his coffee and laugh.
Kind of like I would.
Right. And say, well, I see from your letter that you've had experience on construction and cooking. I said, yeah. He said, we're enlarging the control room. We've got a new console coming in, Studio 3.
Nice.
We've got a new console coming in. The control room isn't big enough because it was upstairs looking down.
Yeah, we got to knock a wall out.
The window is too small. We need to put a bigger window in and enlarge the control room. He said...
And you're going to do it for free.
Right. No, actually, he said, I'm going to offer you, start at 9 a.m., do construction at 4 in the afternoon, come to me, tell me how much money you need to cook for 15 people. I've got 15 people working on the top floor of the studio at Trident. There's a 4-ring electric stove oven. I want you to do 3-course meals for 15 people. Come and get me, tell me how much money you need. Petty cash at 4 o'clock, go down the markets because we were in Soho, buy the food, cook, serve, clean up, and then you can go back to construction till 3 a.m., back at 9.
Living the dream.
6 days a week, and I'll pay you 20 quid a week. And I thought...
What's 20 quid, like $50?
No, it was about $25 then a week. And I thought, I'm in, and I'm getting paid. My German immigrant grandmother didn't quite get over the fact that the eldest of the boys, be it by 10 minutes, had quit law school to become a chef and construction worker in a rock and roll studio. But anyway, as soon as I got in, I didn't know what would happen after the 3 months of construction, if I'd be kept on or anything. And then when I was one of the 12 people struggling to carry the frame of the A-range into the control room. And then I saw them putting these long strips of buttons.
Do I actually have a console that you worked on here in my building? It's
the one in Studio 3 that got shipped out, sold to Cherokee, and then became part of the one in Studio 3. And the wild thing for me is that being on the beach as a kid in Brighton, on the Pebbles, listening to the radio, hearing the Beach Boys and Mamas and Papas and Scott McKenzie, all this, come to California,
That's so crazy.
Go to California. All this stuff going into my brain, then going into music, and then ending up here and doing sessions in Studio 3.
Yeah, no, it's bizarre.
It's wild. I always have to...
And no, the console wasn't here when the Beach Boys did that record. That was actually probably a Dal Connor or Bill Putnam console at the time.
And originally a lot of the great Trident stuff was done on the Sontronics before the Trident A-range.
Got it, that makes sense.
But so that was the journey. Then I just had to work up. I got...
What was the first record, as you were learning to... because you're doing construction, you're learning all that, which is awesome because then you become really entrenched in wiring and you understand signal flow and how everything gets from point A to point B. Did they let you become a T-boy? Did you get to work with recording engineers?
Yeah. But once they started putting the modules in the desk, I thought, oh my God, I've so effed up. I will never understand this. And I thought maybe I can still get back into law school.
That's why I quit and became a manager.
Right.
I thought I would never have the electronics aptitude to understand it.
I'd failed every science. I thought I will never understand how this thing works. And seriously thought about trying to get back into law school, but I got promoted to T-boy. I actually started at a level where the T-boys gave me shit.
Dude, that's a rung lower than the bottom rung.
Yeah, that lowest form of human life wasn't even recognizable.
Aww.
But then became a T-boy. got promoted quite quick because I was so hungry. I was the quickest guy to deliver food and clear up the food from the room. Because,
and you didn't fuck up the orders.
Yeah, got it right. And also, because I cleared the room so quickly, just in case there was a bit of pizza crust that was still warm, that didn't have teeth marks in it, or from the aluminium food container.
I lived off of bagels, I think, for like the first 5 years that I worked in a studio, like stale bagels. So this is cool, but you obviously did grasp it.
Yeah, somehow I did, but even today, the technical side of things has never appealed to me. Looking at the console, looking at all technology, for me, it's all the musical application.
Oh, absolutely.
How does it feel? How does the sound?
How does it make me feel?
Yeah, and how do I create the feeling that I want to have by turning these different buttons or choosing a different microphone?
What kind of records were you guys doing at Trident back then?
The first record I saw being made after construction was Peter Gabriel 2, the Scratch album, with David Rhodes on guitar and Tony Levin on bass and Chapman stick. And I'd grown up with bass. It was one of the first instruments I fumbled around on, was my dad's bass and then saxophone. But seeing Tony Levin play this Chapman stick thing was like, what on earth is this?
Yeah.
So that was the first record I saw being done. One of the next records I saw being made when I was still a T-boy, and I was allowed to stand in the corner at 3 a.m. in the control room as long as I didn't breathe, you know, because I wasn't worthy of the air. That was for more important people. Mutt Lange was producing.
Oh, nice.
That was one of the first records before he kind of blew up. And that was a real revelation, just how much power a producer can have.
Was he engineering and producing?
Yeah.
What a great engineer.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. So that was quite a daunting...
He's a monster.
Yes. That was quite a daunting...
In a good way. Good monster.
Yes. That was quite a daunting thing. Then I got promoted.
Did they have staff first there? No, you were T-boy and then you...
then you become a T-pop. But after being a T-boy, if you'd survived that, before you could be on sessions, you had to go and work in the copy room for at least a month and just copy tape all day.
Yeah.
But you learn everything about aligning machines, different NAB or CCIR.
When I was learning to be an assistant, that was what I was... And I never got very far, but that's what I was learning was... And I work with Shel Talmy. Did I tell you about that?
No.
Very crazy to tell about that later. But yeah, it was just starting to really... do a little bit of help in that department with aligning tape machines and things like that.
I mean, it was...
We run tape all the time. I'm surprised there isn't a machine. Well, there's no... Oh, there is one. There's a tape machine in the corner.
But it was crucial to learn that. I was really bored, and I didn't see the value of it at the time because I wanted to be on sessions. But after being in the copy room, if you didn't screw up, then you had to do a month in the cutting room in mastering, assisting.
So were you editing 2-inch? No.
No, not yet. But the mastering guy at Trident Race Staff was like a legend back then. Trident Mastering was really
huge,
established. So you had to go and assist Ray for a month. And what was happening, everyone was vetting you. You had to go into the tech department, and back then we had 5 techs at Trident.
Yeah.
You had to go in there and learn a bit of wiring and numbering and soldering, all this kind of stuff. But everyone was vetting you to see if they thought that you were the right kind of caliber to be on sessions. One, if they thought that you could make it as a Trident engineer. Also, if they thought that you could be the right kind of person.
Your demeanor.
Yeah.
Vibe.
To be in the room, but also to handle the situation. So anyway, I made it through all those kind of stages, and I became a tape op, then moved up to senior tape op, then assistant engineer, and so on. But as tape op, some of the first records I worked on were with Mike Stone.
Yep.
And it was when Kiss did the 4 solo albums.
Oh, okay.
And it was on all 4 Kiss albums, primarily Paul's and Gene's solo albums, but then on the other 2 as well. And that was one of my first experiences of being in the room, doing punch-ins, being in charge of all the different tape machines, the 24 track, but also the 4, 2-track machines for tape delays around mic stands, and the mix coming out the console into the main Studer 2-track half-inch, which, and then started to, over a period of like time with Mike Stone, started to like engineer with him, and Mike had done the first 5 Queen albums,
Amazing.
you know, for Trident.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and then went and did, you know, Asia, Heat the Moment, Journey, loads of stuff.
Yeah, huge stuff.
And at the time, Mike's wife was Swedish, and so whenever she would call, he'd always like put me on the phone.
Yeah, because you could talk to her.
Just to talk to her in Swedish, and he would just laugh about how funny it sounded, you know, and that was good enough for him.
Did you see the Beatle documentary Get Back, and do you see it's so much footage of Alan Parsons as tape-op?
Yeah.
You know, and I was teasing him about that. He's such a lovely cat, you know.
When that documentary came out, I thought, okay, yeah, Beatles documentary, I think I know everything. You know,
was actually a good one.
I was enthralled. I just couldn't stop.
You see the dynamic. You see the interesting between the 4 of them, and you see like even George trying to say, "Hey, I've been working on this part. Check it out." You know, and they're like, "Yeah, whatever." You know, later, George.
Which is why his first solo albums were the best ones.
Amazing,
because he had all these songs that he could never.
There's some story, and I don't know if it's true or not about. You know, after the Beatles had broken up and George is working on All Things Must Pass and Ringo's working on it with him, and John stops by. I think they were at EMI Studios, I'm not sure. And John stops by with Yoko, and they walk in. He goes, "Oh, what are you guys doing here?" And he goes, "Oh, we're working on this thing." And I don't know which song it was. I don't know what song it was.
Yeah.
But John's like, "Holy crap, George, this is really good," or some version of that.
Yeah.
Like, this is really
John
really
for
good.
George,
This is really good.
It was done at Trident. George did
was it?
Yeah,
there you go.
George did his first 2 solos. John and Yoko did their album.
Oh,
But
okay.
what was wild for me was when I got into Trident, I didn't know anything about the studio. It was the only one that gave me a reply.
So you didn't know any history about it?
I knew nothing. And even when I said, you know, have you got any jobs going as producer? The manager laughed and he said, well,
eventually.
Do you know anything about the studio? I said, no. And he said, well, a few people have done okay. You know, we've done a few records here, but I'm offering you this. And a little while later, I sat down at the piano and I thought there was no one around. And suddenly someone came running down the stairs, screaming at me, "What the F do you think you're doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know." He says, "You know, what gives you the right to touch that?" "I don't know." Voice going higher and higher. I'm trying to stop fluids escaping from wherever they can escape. And he's like, "Have you got any effing idea, you know, what's been recorded on that piano?" I think my voice had gone up to a level that only dogs could hear by then. You know, it's so high. And he reeled off, I'm like, "No." And he reels off, you know,
Queen.
Hey Jude, the White Album, Ziggy Stardust, Hunky Dory, Louis Transformer, Mott the Hoople, T-Rex.
Dude, all my favorite bands. You were naming. I was British Invasion all the way, everything.
Yeah.
From like the time I was like 9.
Yeah.
And kind of still am, to be honest.
Yeah. all those songs. The band Free, All Right Now, Ace, How Long Has This Been Going On? All these things, and Carly Simon did Your Surveying, Nilsson Schmilsson, first 2 albums.
Oh, Harry Nilsson.
Yeah, everyone went there. Carly Simon went there, Richard Perry producing, to use the legendary Trident piano. So
what kind of piano was it? Was it a Steinway? Or?
It was a Bechstein, like you have in...
Is it? Was it really?
Yeah.
I had never heard of Bechstein till I came here.
Yeah.
In like 2010. I mean... I knew Fazioli, obviously Steinway, things like that, Bosendorfer.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just an idiot.
And I think it was only 7 foot. I can't remember. But
they've been around since the 1800s, people. Bechstein's been making pianos a long time.
And Elton John had done his first 3 albums there as well. And they changed the action a little bit on the piano so that Elton could thump on it and it would be a bit... so it was very bright sound.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
But it meant it was a very precise sound. And it was like daunting when I'd left Trident and didn't have that piano that I knew inside out, you know, and had only ever worked on an A range, and suddenly stepping out into the world 4 years later, you know, as an independent engineer.
Oh, dude, and what would have been then? So now this is like early 80s?
Yeah, 81, end of 81, Trident closed. I'd been there for 4 years. They closed. I'd become engineer and I was starting to produce.
Why did they close? Never good.
It was business dealings. Which,
probably partners.
Yeah, you can read Norman Sheffield's book and,
yes.
and read between the lines.
Warring partners. Partners. Yeah.
So,
did you go work elsewhere in London?
No, I moved to New York.
Oh, okay. And Stay with Steve Ferroni.
Stay with Steve. I remember calling Atlantic Studios because I loved Arif Marden's work.
Oh, yeah.
And I called from London, from calling the directory saying, I'd like a number, please, for Atlantic Studios. And I got a phone number, called Atlantic from London. Receptionist picked up the phone. I said, it's Adam Moseley for Arif Marden. And in my best English accent, which I still
you have a beautiful accent.
And
it's quite posh, your accent, actually.
Thank you. And I'm from the south, of England, and I got put through to Arif Marden on the phone.
Hopefully, she didn't lose her job.
No, and I said, I'm going to be in New York. I'd been doing demos with my brother. We'd been doing songs. I said, I'm going to be in New York. In about a month.
But you told him you worked at Trident.
Yeah. And I'd love to come and, give you my demos. And in the end, he put us together with his son, Joe. That didn't develop. We nearly got signed to Sony as an act in New York. But then Sony, or it was Columbia then, they wanted us to move into a different direction, which we didn't want to. And I thought, you know what, I've worked so hard for 4 years to have a place as an engineer starting to produce that I didn't actually want to take the rock star route. Yeah. And so stayed in studios, worked in New York, stayed with Steve for 6 months. And then I got called back to England because of the Falklands War. Because the school I'd gone to in England, the grammar school, we had to do 2 years military. I was in the Air Force. I didn't know I had a military record, which said I could fly. I'd done parachute training. I'd done 2 years of martial arts, shooting, all of this stuff. And I actually got called back. My work visa got revoked by the British government. 24.
It's a bit old.
Yeah, I was in the second wave of the first call-up. Second age group.
How gnarly was Falklands? I'm being an American right now. I mean, I remember when it happened.
Oh, it was so stupid and pointless.
I remember the dispute.
Oddly enough, there were elections coming up and two leaders need to...
Interesting.
Yeah, they needed to unite the people now with an international conflict. I've never heard that happening before.
Yeah. Unite the people with an international conflict.
Yeah, anyone up for war? Oh, you need an election, yeah. Let's pair up on this.
Oh, my God.
So that was Thatcher. Anyway, I went back... to England, and then...
Did you have to
No, I didn't, because by the time I got back, I was given a week to get out of the US. By the time I got back, it looked like Britain was winning, and then the conscription didn't happen of calling people up. A year later, I got a call. Trident had reopened.
Yes, that's what I've wondered about.
They'd bought the second studio, which had been 10cc's studio in Victoria in London, Strawberry. They'd bought the second studio. They were putting an SSL in the second studio, which was major for Trident to put an SSL in the second room.
Why is that? It's major because solid state logic, exactly what you think it is. We'd gone from these consoles, which were all tube and discrete electronics, to microprocessing chips.
Right.
Which was I remember the first SSL we had, we were like, I don't know.
Yeah, it was wild going from like the depth of sound in the A range, and you've got it here.
We're in an SSL room right now, though. This is a G plus with EEQ on it. This console. The best of the SSLs.
But the E series became my thing, So Trident, because the studio had closed and reopened, they'd lost the fluidity of the T-Boy system. So they asked me to come back as chief engineer, although I was...
Now you're going to establish the hierarchy.
Yeah. So I was freelance. I was doing all my own projects, but I was getting paid to be chief engineer and asked to establish the second studio with a percentage of what happened in this. It was a dream come true.
How cool is that?
And asked to put a new team of people together. So with the new owners of Trident, who I'd known from the original Trident, the new team of people included Flood, Alan Moulder, Spike Stent.
Oh, yes. He still credits you as being one of his greatest mentors.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Spike does. We're talking about Mark Stent.
Yeah.
Our friend.
Yeah.
Who we love.
Yeah. Amazing. But at the time we were... I was maybe the oldest of them by a couple of years, but we were all just young guns. And I remember I was back in the Soho Trident One, the original room, we still had the A range. I was doing The Cure in one room, and Flood was doing Depeche Mode in the other room.
I love it.
And none of us thought anything of it. It's just because, like here, every day. Normally it's an established person.
Yeah, you're just working.
And there's no like fanboy kind of stuff going on, you know.
And or it's someone you never heard of, and then a year later it's you too.
Yeah. Well,
Speaking of Flood.
Yeah. And you too was eating.
Oh, it's this band from Ireland.
Yeah.
This religious Catholic band.
It was really eating me up because Flood from Acting Baby had done like 7 U2 albums.
Yeah.
Alan Mould had got involved on a load of them. Spike was mixing them, and I wasn't getting U2. And it was like really getting to me.
Pissing you off.
And then I think it was through Spike. I was working with Dave Sidek when I had the boat studio in Silver Lake.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd been in there with
I forgot
TV.
That you had the boat on Hyperion.
Yeah, and he'd been in with TV on the radio, and at the end, and then he said, "Oh, I got to do a U2 remix. You know, would you do it with me?" And I thought, I don't think it even came out. I thought,
finally arrived.
I can claim U2 like Flood and Alan. You know, not the 7 albums that they have. And,
oh
and
my
Spike.
God, that's so.
But yeah, that was bugging me.
Did you have the freedom when you went back as a chief engineer to do spec projects? Like, were you finding bands that you could bring in when you weren't working on other stuff?
Yeah.
What a dream.
And at the same time, you know, just working on all these major records.
Yeah.
And the 2 of the biggest records that I had were done back to back, and they were the last 2 things I did on the A range. And I'd started producing from like 80, 81. Co-producing and stuff, but nothing had kicked off yet. And then
did any of those guys engineer for you while you were producing, like Spike or anything?
Alan Moulder assisted me for 15 months.
Nice.
So I brought.
Nice.
I feel I brought Alan through, and Al Clay, who left to work with Hans because Hans was our keyboard go-to person.
Yeah.
Probably worked on 40 records with Hans, including
Hans Zimmer.
Video Killed the Radio Star, where Hans did all the keyboards, and I was one of the engineers on that.
First big MTV thing.
It launched with it, and none of us knew.
Oh, I remember it vividly.
I remember that night.
Because it was kind of budgets then went to video.
Yeah.
And video did somewhat kill the Radio Star budget because the miscellaneous budget, which was for drugs and other things, went away because now it was going into video, and to produce a video was $300,000, and to make a record was 50 or 100 if that.
I'd be producing a record.
Video killed a lot.
I'd be producing a record, and I say, we want to put strings on 3 more songs.
Oh, we don't have enough money.
I need an extra $10,000.
Yeah, we don't have enough money because we have to do the video.
Yeah, and then the video is like 3 times your album budget.
Yeah. That was a concern when I first started. That was a real thing. Like, okay, well, we're going to do this record and we have $35,000, and but they just did a video that, like I said, was literally like $300,000.
Yeah, no, it was insane.
What were some of the bands, or do you remember? I'm sure you do remember. Was there anyone that you took a chance on that did really well? Any spec things you did that grew or that launched into other things?
I think a lot of the spec things that I did brought musicians through.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the proudest things that I've got. It's like,
and then they would meet each other.
Yeah. I would always want to bring musicians through. If I was producing an album and there was a new bass player that had come up.
Oh, I like
and
that.
I think maybe I can pull them in for a couple of songs. They'll get a credit on this record. I can connect them. And that was very much, also when my brother and I were doing our demos, I knew Trident was going to close at 81. At the end of 81, I could tell there were signs.
Yeah.
There were some dealings going on that I thought this, part of my legal
your contract law.
Yeah, something, things are changing legally here. And so I started doing demos, and like after my day session, finishing at midnight, I'd call up all the young guys in town. They'd come in, do my demos, which included Mel Gaynor, who then joined Simple Minds, as the drummer.
Yeah.
Tony Beard, who was became with Hall & Oates and other people. All these up and coming guys.
Yeah.
They'd come in and do my demos, and all the time I was bringing them into sessions to help get them established.
Oh,
so it just really worked. And I think that's one of my proudest things was I was always looking to bring people through.
Helping people. I mean, and you are totally like that. You were that guy.
Right.
Yeah, and probably because somebody helped you at some point in time.
No, because no one did.
No one did. Yeah, fuck those guys.
Yeah, because no one, sometimes I'd be in the room and there'd be a phone call and someone would be on the phone and they'd go, oh man, I can't do that record. I'm busy doing this or that. And I'd be standing in the room. It was like, give me the phone.
Yeah, I'll
here.
do it. Yeah, I'll do it.
And that never happened. And I think from the beginning, my music teacher barring me from learning music.
Fuck that guy too.
Yeah. And so that just made me more determined.
Yeah.
So I just thought if I'm ever in a position to help or
give
bring
someone a leg up.
That's what I'm going to do. And
I bet you these players still take your call.
Yeah, and they still thank me, and we're still in touch. We still follow each other, and it's just lovely. Some of them went on and have done really, really well, and it's just lovely. It's funny back then. Even with like the other producers and engineers, we were all so cutthroat. It was it was so competitive.
I call this a fuzzy Shark Tank.
Yeah. I remember I'd got to do some additional production and remixing on Richard Marx, and I was in a studio, and a very well-known producer who was in a different room suddenly burst into my room, and said, "Who are you? How the F did you get this job? What's going on? I should have had this."
What a fucker.
And I'm going, I'm
sorry.
It's
my gig, bro.
I got chosen. Obviously they heard something that I've done, and things were not necessarily with that guy. But what I love now is that for most of us who've now got a bit older, maybe a bit more mellower, we've got a few more credits under our belt, and now we just love seeing each other, talking to each other, and hanging
helping
out,
each other,
and just celebrating that we're still here doing it.
Well, I mean, I'm so lucky because, Joe Ciccarelli has a room here now, and he's so wonderful and humble and amazing. But in a couple weeks, it's like old home week. Ron Nevison's coming in for a week. Eddie Kramer's coming in for a week. Yeah, when Eddie's here, you got to come down and give Eddie shit. But it's bizarre because I just have watched this as sort of like a complete circle coming back around. And
it's lovely.
I like that it's not ageist, too. Yeah. I like that, I like that people actually respect and give credit to the fact that this person's been making records for 60 years. Yeah. Maybe they know how to, not in your case, in 35 years, 40 years, know how to make a record. Yeah. Know how to make a record. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, I think that, when you came, I'm staggering around, but when you came to L.A.
Yeah, 86.
86, yeah, I came in 85, and then I was at where Glenwood Place is now. It was the old Kendon.
Yeah. I remember you from Glenwood Place.
Yeah, so my two older brothers had worked at the record plant, and I would come out in high school from South Carolina. So I met Mike Stone, and I met a lot of people then, Nevison. Klink was the phone guy, right. Jim Scott was a runner, all this stuff. And then my two older brothers worked on Songs to the Key of Life with Stevie Wonder, and there is a photograph in the liner notes of my older brother Rick, he lives in our hometown in Charleston now. He's still a guitar player, and I would walk around high school, back in Charleston, South Carolina, going, "That's my brother," and like Phil Jantis and Gary Olazabal and all the guys that were working at the record plant then. And Ron was the chief engineer, and Nevison was the chief engineer. So, and then Lee Kiefer, who's no longer with us, but. And then when I came back out, I was a bartender. I was a psych major. I was going to be a marriage counselor. After having been a sous chef and a cook and a bartender through college, and basically my brother Steve said I could use your house. He opened a room at the old Kendon, had closed, and it was called Take One, and it was 619 South Glenwood Place. And then across the breezeway at 623 was a completely different private studio called Red Zone. Yeah. So I worked in that facility for 11 years, but I met so many people. And because Steve had been at the record plant, when he decided to, it's in keeping with what you're talking about, like people giving people a leg up, his buddies who were assistants with him or right behind or right parallel to him, that's who he called and said, "Hey, I'm opening this studio." And it had a Trident 80B in it, and he said, and then Klink, I was learning to assist. There was this guy, Makasia Ryan, who was the water delivery guy who we hired to be an assistant. Yeah, it was me and my brother going, "Hey, that guy's strong. He's carrying big bottles of water. He can move tape machines." You know what I mean? And then I mean, I always tell the story, and there were things that came before, but it was that Mike Klink called up. I still work with Mike all the time, Treasure Mike. And Mike said to Steve, hey, I got to re-record this album. It's already been done, and not much money, and I need to work on this record for Geffen. Then we're like, okay, and Take One was sort of what you and I would consider like mid-level. It was a nice studio. It sounded great. It was amazing. It was that whole Tom Hidley, Kent Duncan with the lava rock and the drop ceiling, like all the Westlake rooms, and Glenn Phoenix, of course. But, and it was Appetite for Destruction with Guns N' Roses. You know what I mean? Which I still, and they know this, it was really not my thing. Like, I was listening to Roxy Music and shit. I was deep still down the British music scene. But yeah, so that was kind of one of the first big things I did as a manager.
That's crazy.
It was crazy, right? But it was like you're saying, you're doing sessions every day and you're not thinking about it. And I was never really a fan girl type starstruck person anyway, because when you work doing what we do and you see people creating, A, they're just people, and B, you know what knuckleheads they are.
Yeah. And
what goofballs they are, God bless. But so talented.
But they also want to be able to screw up in front of you.
Yeah,
Musically, they want to go for a note and not hit it, and know that
Or have me hold the beer machine so they can pop off the tops and drink the beer out of the machine. Whatever. Yeah, whatever. But stuff like that, and they, Slash just did part of his new solo record here.
Amazing.
It was so great to see him. But it comes full circle.
If you
keep doing it long enough.
Yeah, and as long as you're treating people with respect.
I think so.
And being honest, and also doing your role.
And not taking shit, I guess, is in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Sort of thinly veiled.
Yeah.
Not taking crap.
Exactly, and there's different ways to go about that. Sometimes you step up to it. Other times there's other ways to navigate it.
It's very difficult. It's a lot of diplomacy going on.
Especially like the producer role.
Dude, your role, we talk about it when we have meetings with our staff, and back all the way back to you saying, I want to be a producer. When people, when we have meetings with our staff, I'm like, look, everyone is subordinate to the artist.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Even the record company guy, even the A&R guy, even though he might not realize it.
Yeah, and they might try and switch it.
When you're a runner, you're subordinate to the assistant. When you're the assistant, you're subordinate to the first engineer. When you're the first engineer, you're subordinate to the producer. But everybody, is working for the artist. But without us, music wouldn't get captured.
Exactly.
So, however amazing these artists are, and I think they know that. I think it's a great symbiosis, and I said it's a really wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. It's a team.
The relation, it is a team, and it's always been about team building, and bringing the best out of everyone, and
or destroying them and then lifting them up later. In your case,
a few producers I can think of. In my first 4 years at Trident, I don't know how many. Maybe a couple of hundred different records that I saw or worked on, and different engineers, different producers coming in and seeing people.
You see the dynamic.
Yeah, and
what works, what doesn't.
Nearly all of them taught me stuff that worked, and a few of them I'd be sitting in the corner going, wow, that's not the way to talk to an artist.
Yeah, you're a
dick.
dick.
If you want to get a performance out of them,
exactly.
Your ego is out of control. That's not going to get you, and it's going to start to break the record. There's going to be a fracture in the relationship.
Yeah.
And in any relationship, once there's a break, it's almost impossible to get it back to where it was.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot just by being in the room, sitting in the back.
You were talking about some great people, and no disrespect to Richard Perry. I think he's an incredible producer, but he was a hard ass, and Ron Nevison too, and I'm friends with Ron, and he'll probably hear this, but also different times people may have been under the influence of substances that caused them to be short-tempered or lack of sleep, perhaps.
Yes, slightly irritable. Maybe.
But that said, I think at the end of the day, and Rick Rubin is a wonderful example of this, making the artist feel comfortable to where they can give their best performance.
Yeah.
That's your job.
For
that's
me,
your job.
Yeah.
The record company and the budget and stuff, that's secondary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At Trident, it was really made very clear that what happens on the control room side of the glass can never get in the way of what happens in the performance side of the glass. Yeah. You are purely there to capture and enable the magic to happen.
The magic.
One of the best producers, one of the best experiences was working with Phil Ramone. Oh my God.
Yeah, sweetheart.
What a master of everything.
Seriously,
and
dude.
Gentleman. And
yeah, he did one of his very last sessions here.
Really?
Yeah. And it was, I think, and I could be wrong about this, I can't remember what it was. I'll figure it out later, and I'll say it when we do the edit. But we did some of that Rod Stewart standard stuff, and that was Richard Perry and like Jules Chaikin. And then, what was Phil working on? It might have been a Rod Stewart thing. It might have been the second sort of standards thing that Rod did.
I worked on a Rod Stewart album.
Did he draw pictures of penises everywhere?
Of course.
He's actually super lovely. I love Rod.
It was 19...
It's a giant head.
Yes.
He's a very large head.
Yes.
Handsome and lovely and fantastic.
Very, very enlarged. The drawing. I thought you meant
No, his actual noggin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing record. Tom Dowd producing, Andy Johns engineering.
Dude, he's one of my favorites of all time.
I was the second engineer on it. Out of control. The first 3 hours of every day were the best effing rock band I'd ever worked with. The next 12 hours of each day were a rapid descent into hell.
Yeah, well, as one or more of the team got more and more intoxicated.
Inspired.
Andy, though, to my mind, one of the greatest engineers. And Tom Dowd, forget about that. That's just insane.
Yeah.
Incredible. Have you ever seen this documentary they did on Tom? It's called The Language of Music.
No, I've got to watch it.
Dude, you got to check it out. I'll find it. I think I might even have a copy. I'll let you borrow it. But it's unbelievable, and it talks about taking stuff from broadcasts like Bill Putnam and Tom Dowd and modifying it to use for recording.
Yeah.
And winging it.
Yeah.
And Jeff Emmerich talking about stuff like that too, just like just winging it. But Andy, there's a famous story about Andy, and I got to know Andy later in life, and we became really good friends actually. And I always wanted him. I would make him always tell me about making sticky fingers, because I always wanted. And he was 19, maybe 20.
That's
and they were all
scary.
Fucked up on heroin, and he was high on blower speed, so he was like all rabid to get it done. And he said that they would hide behind the amplifiers, be like, "Leave us alone." Obviously an incredible record, obviously great, and Glenn, his brother, unbelievable too, so talented. So two very different people.
Yeah,
but no less, Andy, just incredible talent. And he was working, I believe it was with Eddie Money. And there was a story that they were outside of Studio 3 in the hallway, and they were high, and they were peeing into Heineken bottles as a 16-kid Christian choir rounded the corner in the hallway while they were trying to, pee in these beer bottles. I don't know. The things that occur.
Yeah.
Boys will be boys.
Yeah, legends.
Legends will be boys.
Exactly.
People will be goofballs.
Yeah. I mean, so many things were completely out of control. And as part of your education, if you could come through that.
If you could maintain.
And handle it and still do what you were meant to be doing.
Did you ever work with Keith Forsey?
No.
The drummer, do you know? But he did all the Billy Idol stuff and did all that stuff. Yeah, that was a great producer. Yeah. Anyway, never mind.
Talking about what we're about, the relationship between the engineer producer and the artist. Years, I don't know, it's maybe 84, 85. Mick Ronson, who with Bowie.
Yeah.
And people say, Bowie's guitarist. No, he was more than that. As well as co-writing the songs, he was doing a lot of the arrangements.
Dude, I was going to say, an amazing arranger.
Beautiful arranger.
Yeah.
And obviously the first 3 Bowie albums and Louis Transformer that he did were all done at Trident. So,
dude, hunky dory.
Oh, man. But when I was like 11, 12 or 13, that was like my album. I think I was maybe 13. 7 years later, I was at Trident, working in the studio with those records that had such an impression on me, where those records were done. Around 1983, 84, probably 84, 85, Mick Ronson came to Trident. He wasn't doing very well. Him and Bowie didn't have their publishing rights at that time. So he didn't have the cash he wanted. And he asked if he could get some demo time at Trident, in respect of, the legacy and all that. And so I was like, I'll do it. And it's like, so I jumped on that. I would do my record that I was working on till around midnight. Then I'd call him. He'd turn up at like 1:30 in the morning. We'd work till like 5.
Was he working on his own stuff?
Yeah, on his own stuff. We'd work till about 5 or 6 in the morning. Then we had to get out before the cleaners came in, and then I had to be back for my session at 11 in the morning without telling the day session I'd been up all night.
Yeah, you got to conceal that.
Yeah.
You can't act like you've had no sleep.
Yeah. Even though that...
Dude, I think my
decades.
longest was like almost a 40-hour stretch. Yeah. I was hallucinating.
I did a 52-hour.
Oh, God.
Or a 56, and I was
hallucinating. I mean, there might have been some aid along the way.
Not after the beginning. No, because
not
that's
much.
just so detrimental. I had 56 hours, and eventually Flood broke that record, but I was good with not trying to compete on that.
Well, you just become insane.
I was hallucinating. I couldn't figure out where the desk was. It was in the air and it was all bendy. And I was like trying to put my
And there was no acid. He was just tired.
Yeah. And that's when someone came in and like put their hand on my shoulder and said, I think you should go home.
Time. Yeah.
Yeah. But with Mick Ronson, I couldn't believe that I was just him and me standing in the room with this person that had been so instrumental in my love of music.
Oh my God.
And of course, sadly, he's not here now. But out of everything, there's one other example. But out of everything, I would love now just like to click my heels, jump back in time, be in that room for 5 seconds, and just turn to him and say, "You have no idea how much you mean to me."
Yeah.
Click my heels, come back out, because then you can't be doing that. It wasn't the best of times for him. He was trying ideas. Things weren't quite...
Yeah, you had to just be low-key.
It's got to be the trust, and that they feel safe.
A lot of my job is like that, too, with clients. You come to me and you say, oh, I've got this thing and I don't have a big budget, but the relationship is there. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. And then I know when you do, you'll bring me something else.
Around.
Yeah. It's and the people that actually do that, they're in my good grace forever.
Yeah.
The ones who grind me constantly and consistently for always will eventually lose my favor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eventually.
No, yeah.
And I think rightly so.
I think so. I think you can recognize, and that's a big thing. So, sometimes you do a record.
What to spend your time on.
Yeah. But you have to, we all take chances at times. There's an element of risk, and you learn.
You step on ducks.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
But hopefully you learn a bit more of which are the ones and the people worth investing in.
Yeah.
And you get a sense that, okay, maybe not on this one, but, there's a chance it will come back. Or
everything that you learn along the way becomes part of your repertoire, whether it's an engineering trick or a way to deal with a difficult artist or whatever that is. So I want to come all the way around and find out what you're doing now.
Making music, which is great. My studio now is in my house. The house is all studio. The dining room, there isn't a table because we've got a grand piano in there. 2 different studio rooms, a writing room.
Oh, nice. Are you working on anything now that you can tell us about? Anything exciting?
There's 3 different artists. I'm not going to say one at the moment. What I love,
but you're excited.
Yeah, and I love working with new artists, upcoming artists. I've got the licensing sync company. We represent over 140 artists.
Oh, okay.
All over the world. We represent some labels now. A really cool 70s, 80s R&B label. We represent them.
Really?
And I love, I've done all the years of working for the majors and all the pressure and the BS that comes with that. Yeah. I love working with new artists. I love
and publishing's where it's at anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And now people always wonder, there's music in more places than there's ever been music.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard for artists to make money because they can't really make money except with like placement or licensing or touring or whatever, because we're not buying as many although vinyl sales are up. Anyway, it's curious. But the panel, I think I told you this at the time, but last year you were on that panel at NAMM.
Yeah, the producer panel.
My favorite panel. That was just the greatest panel ever. Was you, I think it was Mark Needham. Who was on the panel?
Yeah, Mark
with you?
Needham, Larry Klein.
Yeah, Larry Klein.
And Mark and
there's a bunch of other people on there. If we forgot your name, just know that it was a great freaking influential panel because you all have different personalities, different styles, etc., like that. But the common thread is the same. The thread is we're here to serve the music. We're here to nurture and let the magic happen. Yeah. You know, and that's what we do too. We're here to help you and then get out of the way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I always tell everybody. I tell my staff, I'm like, look, it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's never going to be about you. So if you are that kind of person, you probably shouldn't do this. I mean, you could rise up and be a producer and certainly have an ego, things like that. But at the end of the day, the people who last are the people who get that it's about the music.
Yeah, exactly. And that the artist feels they can trust and it's not a competition.
Yeah.
You know, and I love nurturing an artist. I love developing a song with an artist. I'm not, you know, the first experience I saw was Mutt Lange take the guitar, rewrite the song, throw the guitar back at the band.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I thought, wow, that's a lot of power. That's not necessarily how I want to do it.
Yeah, it's different. Everybody's different.
And I love taking a song from where it starts to where it ends up. I really feel the role of the producer is to help the artist make the record they want to make, but maybe don't know how to.
Well, yeah.
And I really feel that that's my purpose.
Well, and staying true to their vision.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
To really... sometimes the artist isn't...
Not making it Adam's record.
Right. and certain producers who are great producers, I think sometimes the only thing that changes is the picture on the front of the album. But they can sound the same. Yeah. I used to drive my managers mad because the minute I had a hit with something... You
want something else.
I would go and do the opposite. Yeah. And I'd get called into 12 A&R meetings and saying, pick one, you know, whatever you want to do. And I'd say, well, that's great. What do you want me to bring to it? And they'd look at Music Week or Billboard and say, well, your name's in there.
Do it like this, do it like
whatever
that.
You did there, do it here.
Yeah, but you can't do that. Yeah, no. You can't do that. And that's also, too, you and I've seen so many times now still, where, oh, well, we had a hit with a band that sounded like this, so now we want all the bands to sound like this. What a nightmare. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's a drag and for a creative...
Right.
Anybody. Or people listening to music on the radio, it's a drag. Yeah. You know what I mean? I was going to... Oh, fuck, I just lost my train of thought. One of the most versatile producers that I know is Don Was. You know, because
absolutely.
Don... Yeah, because, you know, Don is over here working with Bonnie Raitt, and then he's over here working on this, and it's stylistically very different stylistic.
Yeah, B-52's to Brian Wilson.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Or doing, you know... stuff because he's, you know, had a Blue Note doing some incredible jazz thing. I remember him working with like Etta James and people like that, and then turn around and do something super different, you know? So I think that
I agree completely.
That's where you have that's where you'll have longevity. Yeah. I think.
Me too.
Is if you're diverse.
Right, and not necessarily riding the wave, you know, of the moment.
Follow your gut, man.
Yeah. And make musical decisions.
And hopefully your gut and your instinct through all the years is leading you in the right direction. Yeah. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. I mean, we can always have a part 2 because God knows I'm curious to find out what you're working on now. These secret artists.
And I'm teaching at UCLA, which is amazing.
Wait, aren't you going to get me to go to Berkeley and Valencia, Spain?
Yeah.
Hey, Rob Jasco? I want to go to Valencia, bro.
I did a masterclass there. It's amazing. I know I've raved to you about it, and got to make that happen.
Well, I think I mean, the schools, they didn't have them when we started. Yeah, you know what I mean? I think they're invaluable. If you're listening to this podcast and you're wondering, one of the things I want to talk about is there's no one way to get here. Yeah, you know what I mean? There's, you know, we happen to have both been sous chefs, so maybe look into that.
Mixing is like cooking. Making a record
so much like cooking.
It's choose the ingredients,
dude, it's so much
get
like
the balance, have a plan, decide what you're trying to create, and then move towards it.
And it can be complicated like baking,
Yeah.
Or it could be free form.
Yes. Or it could be very subtle. A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
I think that's a great place to wrap is be the best cook in the kitchen.
Yeah, absolutely. And have a plan.
And have a plan. Dude, Adam, I love you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time and coming here today. And I can't wait to find out what cool stuff you're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I'm doing online mixing courses too.
Oh, yeah. UCLA, online mixing courses.
Yeah.
Support the schools. When you listen to this, the first thing you want to do now is you do need to go to recording school. I'm not gonna bring anyone on, and this has changed. I'm not gonna bring anyone on that doesn't have at least the very basics fundamentals.
Yeah.
And when you go to these schools, know that this is why you're going to school, and that when you come work in a real studio, that this is different. The real world is different than school, but that fundamental training and that knowledge is going to really help.
And that's why I try and...
Humility.
Yeah.
Please.
Absolutely.
Come on.
There isn't the room now for those major ego strokes anymore.
Well, especially in the beginning when you're starting.
Yeah.
But know your worth.
Yeah.
See, this is conflicting messages. Know your worth.
Yeah.
Study hard. Understand electronics and the basics of signal flow, and then shut the fuck up.
Yeah. And try and figure it out. And watch, listen, and try and figure it out.
Yeah. And listen to everything.
Yeah.
That's it. Well, thank you.
Love you
so much. I love you too.